Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch. This video is going to be a overview of the September astrology. I don't normally do this. I love to zone into particular transits, get really granular and go deep, but I felt like trying this out. So I'm going to go over the transits and highlight some things, but I just want to give an overview of where we're at. We are in eclipse season. It is Virgo season right now, and as we enter September. And the first eclipse that we are moving toward is a full moon in Pisces with the moon conjunct the North Node. So September begins with a rise toward the magic, a rise toward surrender, a rise toward magical thinking, miracle, things like this. And Virgo season, some things that I'm really presencing with Virgo is its connection to innocence, right? You might know Virgo's finickiness about things being just so, or the craft being, well done, or things being clean and tidy, right? These can be Virgoan personality traits. And depending on worldview or religion, it can also be like how we define purity. But Virgo has a lot to do with wanting to be, well, let's just bring it back to the mascot, the Virgin, one who is one in herself. And outside of sexuality and like literal virginity, because it has nothing to do really with having sex or not having sex, it is this relationship where there is a type of sovereignty or independence within Virgo of like, I am self contained and I have my own unique relationship to source or God or spirit. And then there is a self organizing through life of in that greater connection to what's sacred and my connection with spirit. How will I precisely make moves that reflect that? How will I tend to my garden, tend to my temple to reflect that sanctity that my life is? And what I'm really feeling for this September is a major theme around a reclamation of innocence. Because we get, for lack of better language, like stained by the world or by our experiences. So you can have like a very pure, open heart, have a bad experience, get disappointed and shut down, and have less trust. And we collect a number of these experiences. And I think that part of what may be happening during this eclipse season is some resurgence of inspiration, of a willingness to believe in magic again, and a release of, the extra information that we've picked up in our lives that we no longer need to grip onto, of like, but if I do this thing and it goes wrong, then this thing will happen. And like that kind of mental attachment to all of those stories and anxieties. I think we're starting to notice where we're carrying too much baggage in that regard. So I want to share a few things along these lines. This is my Instagram at Sabrina Monarch. But I had these memes come to me. I just had Midjourney make them, but this is my text. But you see this woman, if you're listening just to the audio version, it's a comic book style of a woman in a beautiful bedroom, and she has like an eye mask on, and she's just saying, wow, with the eye mask over her. And it says, to become unbothered in a place of historic bother, she marvels as a familiar anxiety she can trace the shapes of by hand disappear and are nowhere to be found. And in the next image, you see a darkened image of her inner landscape, and she's looking up at a butterfly, and her face is dramatically lit. She has a book below her that she's not looking at. And it says, it's just, I don't even think that way anymore. As though I was looking for my bookmark in a book that doesn't even exist anymore. Something else, a higher order of thinking, has inspired me. So I think of that as like a kind of energetic for September, this kind of purity of wonder, right? And that kind of internal innocence and these adjustments in our lives that show us that it is safe for that again, or that maybe there's some ways that we've learned to protect ourselves that we get to soften in some ways. And then at the same time, also, maybe there's other ways that we have shifted or updated our understanding of how we protect what matters to us in a way that is more honoring present moment, and allows us to open within our experience as opposed to feeling like caged by our defenses. So another thing that I made that people really liked on Instagram, but this was just something that came to me about this eclipse season. So actually, let me get this right. One moment. Okay, we'll try this again so you can hear the sound. But this is a little sense for this eclipse season. The ocean is... Here's a little astrology lesson from the oceans of Crete. The ocean is Pisces. The feet are Pisces. The sand is Virgo. The sand is Virgo because it is mutable earth. It's like tiny little earth particles. But look at this. Right now, the south node is in Virgo. And when anything, the south node is kicking stuff up. It's kicking up a layer of debris on the ground. And look at that. If you kick up the sand, this fine sand, it actually clouds the water. This is really terribly esoteric, but I'm going to try to be as succinct with this as I can. The south node is past karmic dynamics, and when it gets that debris layer is kicked back up, that's essentially like anything in your early childhood that is a relive or a remembrance of things that happened in past lives, so that in this life you can remember it. But you don't have to cling on to what happened to you in your life and identify with it, because in that identity, in that clinging, you're going to repeat those same stories over and over again. So if phenomena happens and you're able to find the detachment in some sense, to let it settle, or to, work with what's useful about it, then you don't have to repeat the karmic loop. So that's the challenge with South Node material. Do you grab onto it or do you let it settle? So take it or leave it. This is my metaphor for you all. Look at this beautiful clear water, right? If there were fish here, you could see them. I feel like there's even one, a fish was literally just nibbling at me. So cute. All right, so beautiful clear water. That's going to represent just like the magic, the flow, trust, surrender, and whatnot. Now look what happens if you get all worried and fretful and really focus on the worry and fret. You just made the dream cloudy AF. And it's okay. There's a lot to process there. And look at it settle back down and the dream gets clear again. Mark my words, mark my prophecy. This eclipse season, with the North Node in Pisces and South Node in Virgo, there's going to be some pivotal things, pivotal storylines, where if you can resist the wave of panicking and anxiety, when you're simply actually looking deep into the mystery and you don't have sufficient data points yet, you just have a dream by which you can project things onto. If you can find deeper magic, trust, surrender, flow, tap into that kind of Piscean magical state, and not get so attached onto that maybe cloudy kind of sand that's getting kicked up into the water, if you just allow it some time to settle, or swim out into a prettier sea, not in like an escapist kind of way, but in a creative, visionary way Like, we all know that when you, I mean, I hope you know that when we tap into a more resourced, a more connected state, that things kind of flow and open up. And during eclipse season, I think it will trigger and challenge the spots of like, well, this little thing might put you out of flow. This thing might kind of get you hooked on micromanaging life. Like, where can you surrender and trust more? But you know, I have Neptune transits. But still, the ocean, the last few days, as I was noticing this thing with the cloudiness of the sand and the sea, I thought it was a good metaphor for how all these like little things can sometimes cloud our clarity. Here's a little. So that was a general, like, full on eclipse season message, right? There's going to be a flurry, south node windy feeling, right? We have the south node in Virgo and the north node in Pisces. So we are headed toward more faith, more surrender, more letting go into the mystery. And that is going to kick up all of our, but what about this kind of anxiety, right? And tendency to want to um, manage all the little details, you know, not trusting that things are just going to work out on their own. And so this is the careful balance as well between Virgo and Pisces. It's this axis of effort and surrender. And that is, you know, something that we can really be developing craft in throughout our lives. So the restoration of innocence that I'm thinking of for this month isn't about material circumstances always being perfect. It's not about things having gone well for us in the past. There is a reconciliation with whatever we have processed or dealt with that has marred our spirit a little bit or a lot. And so I think there is an emphasis during this eclipse season of a kind of spiritual renewal, a restoration of innocence, so that we can open back up to life in the places that we learned to be scared, right? And that we can anchor into some higher values and be able to have faith or trust in things that we can't see yet and live in deeper accordance with that. So, just to make a concrete example, one thing that's really moved me and kind of opened my world lately um, is that I was able to realize like where I was caging myself in by almost like having to, you know, I called this on Instagram. I was like, this is chalant summer as opposed to nonchalant, right? Like, I'm going to be super chalant this summer. I'm going to be out with it in terms of my, um, what I'm experiencing, my excitement. Like, I'm not going to try to like be cool, right? Like, there's something within this Pluto and Aquarius time period of like a deep freeze. And in terms of the dating world, there is someone who made a post kind of about like the epidemic of nonchalance and like this kind of standoff between people of like who can care less and trying to guard people from knowing that you care, you know, and the horror of being rejected and all this stuff. And that post took off. A lot of people resonated with it. I think it was like viral to an extent. And that inspired my like, okay, it's a chalant summer. And what I realized and ended up figuring out was that letting my heart out, like just being expressed and more transparent, was coming up against a part of me that, for whatever reason, unconsciously thought that I should make my expression smaller, that I should hide that I care, that I should hide how I'm feeling to somehow stay in the good graces of someone who, you know, likes it when I hide and who probably would drop me the second that I came out of hiding because they didn't sign up for that, which would then reinforce my unconscious belief of I should stay hidden because this thing is not okay. Versus like, what if I just celebrate the reality of my heart? Like, I'm enjoying my life. I'm expressing what's true for me. I'm like seated comfortably in my desire. And if I'm expressive, then it would attract someone who celebrates that expression, right? So just kind of seeing the fear-based patterns, the control of like, maybe I should edit my performance in life or edit how I'm showing up to appease to certain people. Like all of that is just a mess in its own way, right? And that's, I feel like what fear and anxiety does is it's like kind of tinkering at times, where it's one thing to be conscientious and thoughtful and understand, how to keep a system flowing smoothly in your life. It's another thing to be fundamentally at like a spiritual or kind of energetic level, approaching the mystery of some unfolding in your life from a place of fear and contraction and control, running all these anxious patterns and trying to make sure that everything works out okay, versus if it were not so bad, say if you got rejected, say if you had an open heart and it didn't work out, say if you gave something a shot and it didn't work out. Like if that's not the end of the world, if that failure just leads to a next great adventure, maybe you would have more courage to just see the course, right? So kind of seeing how that deeper kind of flight in Pisces of like, I'm going to ride this ocean wave, I'm going to trust the magic. It's very appealing and inspiring in one way. And then there's definitely parts of us that are like, oh no, I can't do that because all of this X, Y, and Z could happen. And that's what's being kind of reworked and examined this month. So let's break it down by transit. It looks like I have some like moonshine or something. It is carrot juice, carrot, pear, ginger. Um, at the beginning of the month, oh, actually, before we get into all of this, I want to share an event that I have coming up. So this will be linked in the notes, but I have a free class on the moon, September 8th at 10:30 a.m. PST. It's called The Lunar Mysteries of Creation. And so this is a transmission on the astrological moon to support you in knowing this archetype at depth, but from a lens perhaps that hasn't been, super considered. If you've followed my Pluto transmissions, it's like that, but for the moon. So the frame that I'm inviting us into here is when you entered into this world, the way that you were met shaped so much of who you are, right? Your environment shaped your neural pathways, your family shaped so much about you. And this phenomenon of contact and shaping is still happening. So there's something about the moon that embodies or enfleshes us. And that not only is our personality or our concept of self formed in some sense through these points of contact, but as we deepen into a new room within ourselves, as we make contact with a new type of intimacy, a breakthrough, right? Feeling seen or met or understood by someone in a place that we've never felt contacted, I believe that that actually accelerates or opens the plot of our life. That there's certain ways that life grows, like the moon grows full or a woman's belly grows full in pregnancy, that these moments that are quite lunar of connection, contact, and intimacy actually expand our life and rearrange the reality around us, right? And I'm sure you've had this experience where you were in someone's company or you felt perceived by someone in a way that was very pivotal and things shifted in your life on their own accord after these moments of deep contact. So that's what this transmission is going to be about, an introduction to the moon and this deeper angle into the magic, the mysteries of the moon. And this is a precursor to the Felt Sense School of Evolutionary Astrology rolling out. I am reteaching astrology with all my updated understandings over my 10 years of practice and 8 years of teaching. Is going to be the amazing, like next level. The course was already amazing and beloved by hundreds of people. And it was just time to completely reteach it and make it its whole next evolution. So I'm super excited to share that with you. And if you come to the Lunar Mysteries of Creation workshop live, there will be something special for you. So getting back into the transits, on September 1st, Saturn, who's in Aries right now in retrograde, is going to go back into 29 degrees of Pisces. So this will be a bit of a tone shift, even though the Saturn-Neptune conjunction was active. So there was already some of that kind of Neptunian, Piscean thing happening, but it was in Aries. And so now we're going back to, what was going on in your life when Saturn was in Pisces? What were you working through? Chances are you actually developed a lot of skill through types of adversity in that area of your life. And now you get to go back and revisit some things or experience some of the fruits of your labors. One thing that I want to highlight is that Saturn in Pisces, I think, has shown us how to be in integrity with our sensitivity, right? That being sensitive doesn't make you a victim. It doesn't make you too precious for this world. But without really recognizing the value of sensitivity, right? Seeing it as a liability or a problem or being told that you're too emotional or experiencing the challenges, right? If you're highly sensitive and that part of you is invalidated from a young age, you learned through the contact within your social reality that it wasn't safe to be that way and that it wasn't going to earn you love and connection. So maybe you suppress that part of you or you've overridden your sensitivity. And miss out on some of the subtleties of your psychic gifts. Or maybe you were so open, so defenseless, and you learned that got you kind of eaten alive or taken advantage of. And so Saturn in Pisces, I think, was like a real consideration of like, okay, you're sensitive, you're empathic, you're porous, you're a deep feeler. How do you anchor that in as an asset, as something that makes your life better, as something that improves your relationships, as something that connects you to your dharma, not as something that brings you repeated pain cycles or misaligned situations that hurt? So we'll be revisiting that theme. And then on September 2nd, Mercury enters Virgo. So you have this kind of like ships crossing and they will meet, where you have Saturn entering the last degree of Pisces and then Mercury entering the first degree of Virgo. And so throughout the month, they're going to get closer to an opposition, which will occur. So I'll speak more to that in a second. But Mercury and Virgo, we had, Mercury and Leo, we had a retrograde. So Mercury was in Leo for a while. Mercury is peregrine. It's just as in kind of neutral in dignity inside of Leo. But when it gets into Virgo, it's domicile and exalted. So there is a dignity pickup for Mercury. So this can help us with clarity and function inside of our communications of all kinds. If there's any places in your life where signals have been misfiring or the message hasn't really been getting across, this might bring in more clarity, or you might also just have the inspiration, or things might land for you to make things a little bit more clear. And so one thing that I really had been tuning into actually the last few weeks was mental boundaries, right? That like I think Mercury in Virgo is really good at focusing on the task at hand and not being, alternately flooded by a bunch of what ifs or a lot of, other considerations. And having a focus of attention and not being split in your attention can be really supportive for being grounded and kind of organized in your consciousness. So instead of being present in your mind to a bunch of possible scenarios that are only in fantasy, getting more granular in the moment of what is your intention, what would you like to be focused on, and see how that clarifies your experience as opposed to feeling like a bit scattered and all over the place. At the beginning of the month, September 3rd, Mercury in Virgo is going to square Uranus and Gemini. So that's going to be a lot of kind of electric insight, A lot of enthusiasm around ideas and the intellect with that as well. And so it could be, highest excitement kind of things, or just like, that's a fun idea. And, you might feel, um, even if beginning to have those conversations or playing with those ideas, like it might open up a new chapter of the storybook. It gets something moving. At the same day, Jupiter in Cancer will trine the North Node in Pisces, which I feel like is really lovely for like good faith in life and trust in the magic. So that's happening at the same time that our brains are going to be a little bit lit up with like all these ideas. So I think the beginning of September is really interesting with just a lot of tone shifts immediately. September 5th, there's a transit that I have a lot of thoughts on, or we'll probably have to go into more depth in another video. But it's Jupiter in Cancer square Mars in Libra. So anytime we have a Jupiter Mars contact, there's a lot of morale. Like there's a lot of like, I believe that things are possible. Um, I believe in my mission. I'm, like a philosophical warrior kind of thing. It is a square and it's happening in Cancer and Libra. And so, what really came to mind for me specifically with the Jupiter in Cancer and Mars in Libra square was like, uh, hopefully some like breakthroughs in like gender relationship across like what I would call like a gender war. So specifically from like a hetero kind of polarity perspective, um, I've been kind of tracking a lot of those conversations, the discontent in the dating sphere, and just what that all is about. And I think there can be like a real entitlement or immaturity in some sense that happens where there's kind of like these idealized, like this inner knowing of what's possible inside of love, like the chemistry, the fireworks, the devotion, the deeper magic, and kind of like just wanting it that way without really going through the initiations or really embodying the deeper energetics that would enable that. So, yeah, this it's funny too because Cancer Libra square can be very petty. Uh, they both can be have like some sass. So I'm just gonna lay it out this way. Um, I'll have like a petty and like the high-minded thing. So how will I organize this? Well, maybe I'll just hold it in the frame that like the beauty of woman, the beauty of man, like the high, like deeper possibilities of like really um like being in the masculine or being in the feminine. Like there's amazing, beautiful qualities of these archetypes. And the um, synergy, the chemistry, the magic between them is deep. And um, the stuff of like great love stories, like there's um, such depth and such possibility in it. And there's a lot of baggage culturally. There's been a lot of pain and suffering. And I've heard this so many times throughout the years, but I've even been really tracking this sentiment lately as it's shown up in multiple places of that desire for love and the willingness to keep loving and keep going for it, even though there has been so much heartache and pain, right? So this can be in relationships, but it can also be with the masculine or with the feminine, repeated wounding with the masculine or feminine. And the way that that can become projected is like, that's just the way men are, that's just the way women are. And that there's a need for deeper philosophical breakthrough and wisdom about the masculine and feminine in some sense, because the misunderstandings between genders create a very turbulent chemistry that can be very painful, right? And there's just these like deeper um, misunderstandings or differences that create like negative loops. So here's a few things I've noticed. Um, let's see. So, like, where do I begin actually? Okay, I'll start here. One is that I think many women have a very deep hunger, immense desire for men, and also have been hurt so many times. And so there becomes this push pull dynamic and like this process on the way to love with men, healing a relationship with the masculine. And women want to be adored, like really revered, valued, respected. And there's a lot of the opposite. And at the same time, the more women tap into their erotic sovereignty and cultivate their internal magnetism and their pleasure, like without a man, it inspires the men around her to show up even higher. And it's this kind of odd paradox where a lot of women, I think, can be locked out of themselves, locked out of their deeper softening or deeper magnetism, and really wanting the man to set the tone for them first. And it doesn't necessarily work that way as easily. And so it's a little bit paradoxical for women if they're really consumed with this deep desire for the masculine, the deep desire for his presence, for her to find something first within herself that begins to elevate her magnetism and draw in more inspired men. Um, I encountered a woman recently who was talking about all these huge gestures that she wanted men to be making for her romantically, but her energy when she was kind of talking about this felt really contradictory to that. Her energy felt very kind of like almost out of body and frantic and like out. And it didn't have that kind of like deeper magnetism, like come to me, like kind of energy. And these kind of gestures that she was imagining receiving felt really far away and like in fantasy. Of course, that's my judgment, and it's not the most flattering judgment, but it was an interesting kind of schism of an energetic. In the same way that, like, a man who has the energetic frequency of like a gas station hot dog, wanting a woman to submit to him, it feels like a very far off fantasy. And so I just think that sometimes at the outer edges of this deep discontent of the opposite gender, there is like this kind of immaturity and entitlement that, like, the deeper desire, the deeper, truer thing behind all that distortion, um, or personality layers that are in the way is just like wanting to experience um, one's erotic potency being met and like being interacted with by a desirable other and feeling that deep charge and deep aliveness. And when trust is not established internally, trust is not established in the relationship, right? Like another one could be when women kind of fawn and play really nice and like act like, you're amazing. I just adore you. And it's like not coming from a real place, but it's seen as like, oh, I'm supposed to adore my man. And that's like what will make him commit to me. But for a man receiving that being like, I don't think I've even earned that yet. likewise, or a man obsessing over a woman before they really know each other. And it's like, why are you obsessing over me? Like, just like these kind of patterns of trying to engage or enlist people into our romantic fantasies in a way that's actually not working and that is kind of repelling. And usually there's something internally that's not being fully met. And there's also just some core misunderstandings about like how to relate and how to engage. And then there's all this imagery or all this fantasy and culture of what it looks like to be in a romance book or a romance story and being like, I want that. Even though we just met on an app, you need to ask me out now, or else like you're not serious about me, right? Or like, I'm dating for marriage, so we're going to have that talk on our first date. Like there's just kind of a lot of energy inside of these kind of relational clashes that are just misguided. And so when I think about the Jupiter and Cancer square Mars and Libra, I think there is like a deeper wisdom breakthrough at hand. And so the things I listed were just, maybe a little bit more crude almost, like they were more like at large. But I think there's micro ones as well. Like even if you are kind of like deep in the mystery, in like this deep in this romantic discovery that is already very beautiful. I think there's like these gates where we have these distortions based on gender conditioning and gender wounding, where throughout history, like the polarity between men and women has had um, a lot of pain, right? Like there's been patterns and things that have been inherited by culture. And then we're just kind of dating or inside of romance, and we're not just engaging with um, someone that we're attracted to, but we're engaging with our whole concept and inherited backlog of what it means to interact with a man or what it means to interact with a woman. And if things aren't going well for us, it is quite possible that an internal reorientation or an internal healing with that gender dynamic or with the masculine or with the feminine will open up a whole new mystery in life, like open up a whole new doorway. People will act differently around you. Places where there was repulsion and everything wasn't going your way, like it could shift where there's suddenly more ease, right? Or more magnetism. And yeah, I think also like when that process gets frozen, I've seen people just kind of create that into ideology of men are this way or women are this way. Um, and people can get really fired up about that or really about that. But at a deeper level, who wants that? If you look underneath it, this kind of discontent or hurt or even crustiness comes from a deeper ache for the real thing and for real love. So I think the Jupiter Mars square Cancer Libra is going to have a lot to do with some kind of romantic breakthrough. And then shortly after that, September 7th, we have our first eclipse. So let me actually just show it. So this will be a full moon in Pisces with the moon just a few degrees away from the North Node. As I was saying, I think that the South Node in Virgo is kicking up some old anxieties, old micromanagement patterns, and that we're learning to not grab onto these fears because as we grab onto those fears and get involved with them, as I was suggesting with that image, it starts to cloud the water. And so that may happen, but notice it, right? Because it might be coming up for you to actually release and let it go. And if you're able to anchor into a higher or more resourced field, so a place where you feel a connection to the sublime, a place where you feel deep peace, a place where you feel pleasure and gratitude in your body, a place where you feel opening, a thought, a perspective in life that really opens something up for you. I shared this with my mailing list, but one thing that really empowered me along these lines was a conversation that I had with my friend Daniela Gill. And this was happening when I was having a lot of that South Node Virgo, like anxiety kick up experience. And she said something about how I could basically retrain my perception to just kind of be like, we to transitions, right? Endings, change, instead of, all these kind of like despair habituated patterns, trusting that when something ends, the next thing is even bigger and greater. If I look back on my timeline, there's many times where that was true, where something ended before I wanted it to, and I was kicking and screaming, and it was so horrible. And then life opened up to something amazing. And I look back in retrospect, and it's like, that's great that that happened. I was noticing this even with like, I just practiced being happy in transitions, and like miracles opened up. So when she told me this, by the way, it reminded me immediately of the concept of the bardo in the Tibetan, yeah, the Tibetan bardo. I don't know that much about it. What I am picking up from it is something that I read in a book on yin mysticism by my friend Brynja Magnuson. But it was describing that basically in a reincarnation context, that at death, which is an ultimate transition, there's like a tunnel, right, with a light. And that if you practice being as joyful as possible, you're going to get farther into that tunnel, and kind of the joy will carry you into a better next life. But that if inside of the bewilderment and terror of death, you get scared, you might take an early exit and kind of end up in a less inspired or not as great next life. And that this is something that you can practice inside of transitions, inside of the mystery and life in general, is that when you are anchored in joy and surrender, that velocity actually takes you farther into the tunnel to like a next amazing thing. But that the energy of like fear and despair and sadness and whatnot slows you down and has you take an earlier exit. So without being perfectionist or crazy about all of that, it's just like just considering how much buoyancy can your joy and trust actually literally give you when things are changing. So I began to experiment with this for fun. Like I was even sad when the sun went down. Like I'd watch the sunset and it was so beautiful, but when the sun went down, I was like I miss the sun because I love the sun so much. And I started practicing just being like, yay, like now it's nighttime. And just practicing the innocence of being excited, like, wow, I loved the daytime and now it gets to be night, right? Or like going to bed, like, yay, the day is over. That was great. Waking up, like, yay, it's a new day. Like this innocence of, a friend also like visiting or leaving town or something. And instead of being like sad and whatnot, just being like, that was fun. And now like the next part of my week gets to happen. And yeah, it's such a reclamation of innocence. But what I noticed too is that this first night that I practiced this with the sunset, when I came back to I walked back from the beach, nothing to be sad about there. And there was a bag of fresh vegetables from the garden tied to my door, and I made food with it for dinner. It was like perfectly synced on time. Like I had all the other food I needed in my kitchen, and I was able to have like a fresh garden salad and some fish and buckwheat. And it was just like literal heaven on earth. And so, what would it be like to like anchor into these kind of higher vibrational, more buoyant paradigms, frameworks, right? Even the practice of experiencing joy inside of transition is such a mental habit, Virgo, that could be entrained. But that this could apply also to things that we get attached to, or like we get really attached to outcomes. And if things don't go our way, being able to be like, well, that wasn't like God's plan. And like, I'm excited for what's going to happen instead. Right. And like, not faking that kind of joy, but actually trying it on as like a pattern interrupter. Because if you feel a lot of like Eeyore energy, despair, and grief, chances are a lot of that has become wired in your brain and isn't even your true personality. Like it's a well-worn groove in your psyche and brain. And so it's literally easier to be sad. And so if you start to pattern interrupt that again with this higher field, um, magic can happen. I would read these channeled texts as well that they were like the Oren books by Sanaya Roman. But it said in one of the books that a positive thought is vibrationally more powerful than 100 negative ones. And I thought that was super cool because um, it was like you can just add something that's little, that's small, but high vibrational, if you will, and it will add so much and kind of counteract a lot of the inertia of whatever heaviness that we've been, stuck carrying on to. So, first part of September is a lot about this like rising kind of trust and faith in life. Mid-month, we're going to have a lot of kind of like Sun and Mercury in Virgo. They're conjunct the South Node. And then we'll have a Mercury Cazimi. So that's the Sun conjunct Mercury. So there may also be a lot of moments of clarity mid-month. And I think they will be especially energized by this kind of reclamation of innocence or reclamation of joy that we might be working with. Something that I want to put here is that our minds are literally not really equipped to contemplate the whole of reality. Like our minds actually have to work with separation and with like segmenting things because our minds don't grasp totality in some sense. So when we are trying to mentally analyze things, we often also make false assumptions based on missing data points, and we can get like very spun out. And it's not like the mind isn't useful, but I think it's worth noticing where clarity and where mental activity can help you find a precise next step. But when you want to feel into the bigger story and like that sense of a field of expansion, that maybe certain things like trust and faith actually energetically give you more space to feel into wholeness. And that when you're analyzing things in a very granular Virgo way, then that's a little bit more pragmatic or a little bit more process oriented, like you're just seeing this much at a time. September 16th. So at some point here, Venus went into Leo. Let's see, when did that happen? Just checking. Sorry, no, Venus is in Leo this whole month. My bad. Okay, so Venus is in Leo, but September 16th, Venus in Leo will sextile Mars in Libra. And then both Venus and Mars will make aspects to Chiron in Aries. I thought that was quite interesting. So let's just actually look at the chart for September 16th. So we have this Venus Mars sextile, and then Mars is opposite Chiron and Venus is trine Chiron. So interesting, right? It's like there's going to be some kind of harmonization happening between the archetypal Mars and Venus, maybe echoing some of the breakthroughs that were happening earlier in the month around that Jupiter Mars square in Libra and Cancer. Leo and Libra together have a lot to do with expression of the heart, right? Like the relational dance as it relates to revealing what's on our heart. So Venus in Leo is actually very generous in terms of revealing her excitement. It would be the part of us that is more showy, the part of us that creates romantic gestures, the part of us that like really puts our heart out there, and how that relates to kind of like the dance in relationship. One thing as well is like Um, I really love Madeline Moon's book, Artist of Love. I think it is fucking brilliant. The audiobook is amazing. I highly recommend it. But through basically like this process of making art with relational triggers, uh, let me like reel in what I mean to say this thread here. So if you're holding yourself and holding your heart back, like I was saying at the beginning, you're basically holding court for people that are benefiting from your smallness, right? Like if you are holding back your expression because you know that you would be rejected or whatnot, you're basically kind of like trying to keep something that isn't really, something's off. Versus if you actually just let it out, you express and you do so in a way that actually is connected to your own joy and like you're really backing your own expression, then that's either going to deepen the connection or it may just reveal the incompatibility. Um, and I think that there may be something important with that with this sextile, right? Mars and Libra might be trying to avoid some conflict. And at the same time, it might be like, hey, like if I bring my extra fire into this dance, will you match me? Do you want to match me like this? And if not, that's okay because I'm lit up with my own fire and I'm glad that I did this and I'm not ashamed. So I think there's maybe something about like revealing that will be at play here. And then the Chiron and Aries part is like there being some deeper ouch or sensitivity that we're navigating around rejection, how we modified ourselves because of past rejection and how that has become part of our like a scab that we're trying not to pick at or something like that, and how these deeper layers of revealing our heart inside of relationship might invite us to actually like heal some of that or like look into, you know, why do I think it's not okay for me to just be myself fully? Like what would it mean if I like really backed who I was and like brought that energy and brought all that aliveness? I think there's something really powerful here too as well inside of like this deeper level of responsibility that one can take um, to be the energy in the room, to become what it is that you wish other people would be, and then to have people mirror and match you there and resonate at a frequency with you there. Um, yeah, so I think there's going to be some deep things about expression and like coming out of our shell and a rebalancing that's occurring in relationship because of that. September 17th, Mercury in Virgo will oppose Saturn retrograde in Pisces, and then the next day, Mercury will enter Libra. Um, so that's something that was kind of like I was saying before, like these ships crossing, and that's when they meet. Um, but I think we're actually doing some deep recognitive patterning this month about bringing our Virgoan intelligence, our mental clarity and sharpness up to speed with new versions of ourselves that have more faith and trust and surrender in life. So that instead of like fretting and micromanaging and using your mental energy from a place of fear and control, that you're using your mental energy more to like adorn the temple or create the ceremony or create the magic, right? Or meet the soul retrieval process. Like you're becoming more of an artist inside of the magic as opposed to fretting in a way that keeps you disconnected from the magic. Venus enters Virgo September 19th. So this will maybe make some things about the craft and practice of love, like um, Venus is going to be in a Mercury ruled sign. So there's going to be maybe some thinky energy. Venus might get in her head a little bit, but it might also be a time where we're really motivated for like craft projects around aesthetic types of things. And also, there may be some deeper, like, it was Virgo season and there's like this reclamation of innocence and whatnot. I think with Venus and Virgo, there's like a deeper layer of um, forgiving what it is that we find like imperfect about ourselves. And that's keeping us from engaging wholeheartedly in love because we get concerned with these little details. So there may be space to kind of comb through that. Um, and again, staying anchored in that more resourced kind of Pisces North Node eclipse season field as maybe some of these relational insecurities might come up. And then we have another eclipse, September 21st. Let me show you the chart for it. And so this is an eclipse, a new moon at 29 degrees of Virgo. And this is ruled by Mercury because Mercury rules Virgo. So we have Mercury in 5 degrees of Libra, and it's going to be separating from an opposition to Neptune in Aries. Something that I just tuned into specifically for this eclipse was that this placement, the ruler of the eclipse, is in the decan of Libra that is associated with the Two of Swords. And it's often pictured with a woman who is blindfolded. And it's a card about going within to discern and weigh options. So if you remember something from earlier, this image of the woman who's wearing a face mask and is having this transformation of her anxiety. I think it's interesting the idea of like the blindfolded person or like kind of closing yourself off from the outside world for a moment to go within and make a choice or make a decision. The Two of Swords can have to do with these different processes where we're deliberating between two options. And then there's like the secret third thing or the secret fourth thing. There's like actually a lot of options, but we momentarily go within to feel for those. And when I'm thinking about um, deliberations that are sourced in fear and anxiety, essentially, like one of my meditations this month and something I would invite you to practice as well is just beginning to notice when you are in fear, right? That when you have like any kind of worry come up of like, well, what if this, or am I doing it right, etc., that's vibrationally connected to fear. And if you can catch yourself inside of that, because we often just don't even know that we're doing that, we're like blind to it, right? Then you can look at the situation differently. So if you have any breakthroughs this month with all this Pisces energy, with the full moon in Pisces, that is, if you have any breakthroughs of resourcing into a higher state of faith and love and trust in life, then maybe you'll notice when you slip or fall from that and you're in fear and anxiety. And when you're in fear, you're going to have these kind of options of ways that you're then going to control the situation to kind of like quarantine the possibility that you're afraid of. And your way of moving through life becomes limited by that. So if instead you can open back up to that bigger field, maybe the thing that you think is a problem isn't even a problem anymore, right? The thing that you're fretting about isn't something to fret about. If you're holding it in a much higher and inspired context, and then you're deliberating what would be my next inspired step, there's all these different choices available. So Virgo is about craft, right? And there's types of craft that we do when we're coming from fear and we're trying to quarantine the possibilities that we don't want to happen. And there's a type of craft when we're rooted in love and possibility and we are acting as gardeners of our inspiration and we're moving through life in that co-creative, inspired way. I think this Virgo eclipse might have something to do with that, of noticing where we're rooted from energetically and pivoting into a higher resource field and then playing with our options. I'm not saying that you don't have to be practical or deal with things that are happening in your life, Um, but I think there would be quite a few opportunities for things to take more exciting, enjoyable trajectories when we root into a more resourced frequency from the get-go and interpret our options and interpret how we're going to show up in the situation from that place of greater faith, trust, and possibility. September 22nd, Mars enters Scorpio. We had Mars in Libra for a while, so Mars in Scorpio is going to make things sharper, more surgical, more spicy. Um, and that can be great, right? If there's places that you're um, really wanting to dive deep or like go hard or like go all the way, I think Mars in Scorpio is really supportive for that. I think Mars in Libra brought us a lot of awareness generally about our strategic consciousness, the ways that we play these like chess games, the ways that we are social operators, and how that has been a problem for us or where it has been tactical and maybe useful, maybe diplomatic. Um, but Mars in Scorpio goes for the root. Like Mars in Scorpio will be like the sting that hurts, but ultimately you feel better for it in the end. So with Mars and Scorpio, let's see, where do I want to bring this one? I would say just consider where like precision and where hitting the actual spot is going to save you a lot of time, where it's going to be more intense, um, more triggering in some sense. But if you have the capacity, you have the space to integrate the sting, then it's going to be quicker. And so this could just be if you are reflective about when something bothers you or when something unnerves you, getting more into that root cause of like, what's this actually about? And instead of spinning in the top superficial layer, take it down and have the medicinal experience. In connection, though, I would give a fair word of advice that I think that when people sting, that like if you're someone who has like a venomous capacity and you know how to like throw a dart at someone and make them, make them feel something very deeply, that it can be like not great, toxic, if you will, to like throw things in people's faces that they told you in a moment of trust or confidence, right? And say it's someone that you're intimately connected with. And then in an argument, you just like throw that spicy thing at them that they actually told you with trust. That's going to erode trust, right? And so I think that sometimes people do that when they kind of like, they, they're bottling in some kind of venom and they just like blow up and say something really harsh, that they are at a limit and they've been at a limit for a very long time. They've been enduring, right? Like they have some needs that have gone unspoken or they haven't recognized that they have a need. And then they just blow up and spew the venom. And you want that to not happen. You want to address these things more precisely before they build up to that point. And so that's where, the deeper magic of intimacy with Scorpio is going to be more like connected to things as they're unfolding and not have to be kind of in freeze until things get that bad. Um, so this could also just be like a higher framework that you might hold if you know that there's just certain things you wouldn't say or ways that you don't cross certain boundaries no matter how mad you are. Like maybe you have to leave the room and cool off or something like that. But I think Mars and Scorpio does bring up where we are capable of being weapons and how we need to wield that wisely and wield that as a sword that cuts through illusion, right? And not as a way to wound other people. And so internally, deep shadow work or like the ability to get to the root of things, the ability to clear charge, right? And clear things as they're arising and not letting them build up can also be useful with Mars and Scorpio. And lastly, just a few more things here that I'm going to highlight for the month. September 23rd, the Sun in Libra will oppose Neptune retrograde in Aries. I think that might be a little bit mystical. We already have like Sun in Libra is already a placement that's very concerned with the other, right? It's like less about selfishness or like my own agenda, and it's more consensus or relationally oriented. And then Neptune is in Aries. So the planet that is about spirituality or like the dream or mysticism is in a more selfish sign. And I think that the opposition between Sun, Neptune, it makes us feel more porous, makes things, our vision, our psychic sight, maybe the illumination of things can be more porous and more mystical. And I think it will specifically open up maybe some realizations about where there is a collapse and duality between selfishness and connection, as in, where does honoring ourselves at a deep level actually make us more truly connectable, right? Like if you have ever received something from someone who is only giving to you an obligation, um, there's ways that that probably didn't feel great, that you didn't feel super connected, right? Or when you've given out of obligation, or when you've played a role that wasn't really true and authentic to you, there's a limit, there was a cap to how connected you felt. Versus when you did something, when you expressed yourself in a way that was for you, as much as it was for moving the moment or the plot forward. Then when the other person met you in your raw truth like that, you probably felt so much more connected. So I think there's going to be a bigger breakthrough at the end of the month around like, how does actually bringing your truth and being yourself make your relationships better, right? And how alternately, inside of connection, inside of like really listening deeply to people, does that stir up and awaken something in you? And so, just this kind of dance of relationship, there might be something of kind of removing or blurring some of the visions that we have of separation, where, you know, where we're actually winning better as a team. And also, you want to be on a team with people where you can actually be yourself and bring yourself. And so, yeah, something happening around a rearrangement of our concept of selfishness and how that can bring more peace or more energy into our relationships. And then at the end of the month, September 24th, we have a lot happening on that day. So let me just actually put up the chart. So September 24th, we have the Sun in Libra forming a grand air trine with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini. And so, if you remember at the beginning of August, we actually had that, but with Mars there. So, if you want to think back to what that was like, if you remember that transit, or what was kind of the feeling at the beginning of August, but now we'll have the Sun here. And so, we already had the Sun opposite Neptune, right? Now, the Sun is also contacting all the outer planets at once, actually, at the end of the month. So there is going to be a major theme around connection and relationship because it's Sun in Libra, but also like some deeper material or content that comes up inside of our relationship with connection. Maybe something, yeah, deep, unconscious, ancestral, transpersonal. Um, Something I was thinking of with this as well is just like we sometimes like the individualism, and I'm from the States, so I have a lot of, and I'm an Aries, so I have that kind of sovereign, pioneering, individualistic spirit in certain ways, and I love that. But at the same time, that kind of spell at times can really disconnect you from like the web, right? The mycelial web or like the kind of synchronistic web. And there's ways that, like, when you're inspired and when you're letting your purpose freely move through you, those things are coming through you because they will connect you to the experiences and people that you're meant to be connected with. And sometimes at a personality level, we stifle that because we're like, ew, that's cringe. Or like, I don't want to market my offerings in public, or I don't want people to see this part of me. And so we stuff it down for whatever reason. Um, and, alternately, when we're drawn to other people, we're wanting to connect with them at a personal level. We're wanting to work with them. Everything that they've experienced in their life, all the codes that they've gained through their initiations, we're drawn to that. So there is like a deeper magic of teamwork that as we move through life and develop parts of ourselves and develop our gifts, that it's going to magnetize people to us that want to code exchange with us and vice versa. And that's really powerful. That's like one of my favorite things about existing. If you listen to Magic of the Spheres podcast and listen to my podcast interviews, like I'm impressed sometimes with like I have epic people in my community. Like I know so many amazing people. I'm very proud of that. Like, and part of that has just been this deep, um, like evolutionary urge I've had through my life to expand past my own limitations. I've always been on some kind of quest or seeking. And then I encounter people that seem to have something figured out that I don't. And I'm like, I want to know. I want to connect with you. Or like, I'm drawn to you. I want to connect with you. And I've also rigorously worked at my own gifts and talents and broadcasted it to the world so that people could find me. And that is not just, it's like it's so personal to be on your path and to be committed to expansion or committed to becoming the best version of you. But it's also like for the joy of getting to share that with your community and getting to share that with people that light you up and inspire you. And there will be certain points on that journey where you feel terribly alienated, isolated, and alone. You're like, I can't relate to anyone. No one gets me. I'm not inspired by the social gatherings. I don't want to go out with people because your soul's wanting something deeper, So you go into these phases of maybe less socializing, more focusing on your craft, focusing on your dharma. And then life opens back up again or whatnot through time and space. And you meet people where it's like, feels so kismet, feels so fated and magical. And so I think just having trust in that process and considering that it's a dance and that you have to take part in it. So if you have these moments in your life, because they're threshold moments, there's been many moments in my life where there's something kind of dangling at the edge that I'm like, I want to explore that. But if I explore that, I'm going to be too weird and there's not going to be anyone for me on the other side of it. And it's always an illusion. Like the more that I like actually develop that deeper frontier of inspiration, the more resonance and connection I find on the other side. Even though it maybe narrows the people or makes me a more specific frequency, I think it's like trusting in the resonance, the musicality, right? It's Sun in Libra. And so when you follow your fascination, your inspiration, you are very musical with destiny. When you don't listen to that music and you're like, well, that's just going to alienate me or make me weird, or I don't know, I just want to like hang out with my friends and just not do that yet, you're kind of like denying that process that wants to happen. So feel into the kind of like levity, and this is like a grand air trine. So I think some of these things might be kind of quick moving or can escalate more quickly, where it's like you have an inspiring conversation and then someone forwards you an event or something because of something that you talked about. And then you go to the event and you have this internal breakthrough that's really powerful. And you make this decision in your life because of that, or you meet an important person at the event. And it's just like things play and like take off because we riffed with the music of our inspiration. So that was our month of September. I'm like, wow, I never do this. I did forget to say to leave a comment to let me know what resonates with you. Make sure you come to the Lunar Mysteries of Creation talk. And yeah, I would love to hear what you took away from this. And I will be coming back and revisiting these transits as the month goes on.